Hello everybody and welcome back to Hippie Shit, the YouTube channel where we talk about self-development, spirituality, and lots of fun life stuff like that. Today is day 4 of Growing Through a Breakup, the series of videos where I talk you through how to heal from a breakup and find a sense of peace, joy, and love in the process. In today's video, what we're going to do is actually do a lot of unpacking. So, for the first 3 days, what I asked you to do was write down your thoughts and your feelings as they come up, investigate them with a sense of curiosity, and see if you can start to find kind of a source of the thoughts. In yesterday's video, I also asked you to take an attachment style inventory. I hope that you did that. If you haven't, go do that before you watch the rest of this video. You're going to need to know that information for this to really make sense and be constructive. So when it comes to attachment styles come from different core wounds. So some of us have certain things that happen to us in childhood that affect the way that we are now as adults. And I'm not just talking about relationships either. There are 3 insecure attachment styles that we're going to go over real quick just to give you kind of a brief description of what this may look like. You can look at attachment styles on a spectrum. So right in the middle are people that are secure. Those are the fortunate ones, right? Those are the people that don't have a lot of wounds, that don't get triggered very easily. Their relationships are generally healthy, and they usually have a lot of self-confidence, a lot of comfort, a lot of willingness to be vulnerable and open up and connect with people, and all those beautiful things. So they find a lot of fulfillment in relationships pretty naturally without really having to do a lot of inner work. Lucky y'all. On one end of the spectrum, we have the anxious. So this is the anxious or the anxious preoccupied attachment style. These are people that are insecure. These are people who are very loving and very kind, very generous, very giving. The downside is that they can occasionally come off as needy. So these are usually people who had parents that were not consistent with their love. So sometimes you had your needs met by your parents, sometimes you did not have your needs met by your parents. If at any point you received conditional love during your life, you're probably going to end up with some wounds that can make you lean a little bit more anxious. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the dismissive avoidant. These are people who are not comfortable being vulnerable, who don't connect easily on an emotional level with other people. This can show up in any form of relationship, familial relationships, friendships, or loving relationships, but generally, people that are dismissive avoidant are more likely to see this really appear in romantic relationships. Dismissive avoidants are not bad people. There are a lot of videos that kind of compare them to narcissists, which is an entirely different set of issues. I think that the connection is mostly made because some of their behaviors can seem fairly similar. They can show up in relationships in similar ways as narcissists, especially towards the beginning. We're not going to get into a lot of that in this video, but just in general, understand that a dismissive avoidant person is somebody who is going to need a lot of space, has a very strong need for independence, and won't necessarily connect with other people on a romantic level, on an emotional level, at least not very easily, not without a lot of work. There is a third attachment style, and that is the fearful avoidant attachment style, and my heart goes out to you if you are fearful avoidant, because I am also fearful avoidant naturally. Fearful avoidant partners are those who have core wounds from both ends of the spectrum. So, on one end of the spectrum, you may not have received consistent love, you may not have learned how to meet your needs sufficiently, and so you do crave connection with other people, but at the same time you also learned that connecting with other people was a way that you got hurt, and so you are afraid to be too dependent on somebody else, you are afraid to be too involved. People that are fearful avoidant are normally the partners that are very loving and very giving, but also are going to have one foot out the door. Now, because a fearful avoidant partner has wounds at both ends of the spectrum, it can be more challenging to heal from that, and I speak from personal experience. I have shown up in past relationships as very dismissive avoidant before, very emotionally unavailable, and I have also shown up in relationships as anxious preoccupied and very needy and very clingy. And honestly, it just depends on the partner that I'm with. It depends on how they're showing up in the relationship. I believe that this exercise is very important to do because it gives you a chance to unpack your previous relationships. We're not just going to focus on one specific ex for this one. You didn't think we were, right? If you can uncover your core wounds and discover your attachment style, then it gives you a point of reference for what you can focus on for healing. It also gives you a list of core beliefs that you can start to watch out for and see how they're appearing in your daily life. So for example, if you are anxious, preoccupied, you may also be prone to people-pleasing. Fearful avoidance can also be people-pleasers, although it can show up a little bit differently for us. You know those moments where you're not setting a healthy boundary in advance, but rather somebody gets a little bit too close to a core wound and you've put up a wall there and they just kind of fall into the moat and it's just full of crocodiles? That's how people-pleasing can show up. It almost appears to be like a trap. I do want to say that all of these behaviors are good things, and I don't mean that in the sense that they're healthy or constructive, but all of these behaviors come from a place of fear and a desire to protect yourself and protect your boundaries and fill your needs. However, there are much healthier, much easier behaviors that are much more conducive to a happier life, and the point of this series is to learn what those behaviors are. Okay, so let's talk about some core wounds and also the feelings that can be attached to them normally. Before we get started on this portion, I do want to say a big thank you to Thais Gibson from the Personal Development School. This list is actually based very heavily off of her work and some resources that she has provided. If you haven't heard of Thais Gibson or the Personal Development School, I do highly recommend that you check them out. They have a lot of information about healing your attachment style. It's all very powerful work. Core wound number 1 is a sense that I will be betrayed. Normally, this core wound shows up as a sense of anger or just a complete lack of trust. This core wound can come from a place where, as a child, you weren't able to rely on a parent to meet your needs consistently. For example, if you had an alcoholic parent and you couldn't trust them to be sober when you needed them, for example, or if you couldn't trust them to consistently show up for you and meet your needs, that can very often be a source for the I will be betrayed core wound. The second core wound is I will be abandoned. The third core wound is I am bad. And the fourth core wound is I am defective. Now for the I will be abandoned, I am bad, and I am defective core wounds, those typically show up with a sense of shame or a sense of panic. I know for me personally, when I feel that I am going to be abandoned in a relationship, I absolutely panic. And this is what usually manifests in an anxious, preoccupied individual as a sense of neediness and clinginess. If their partner starts to pull away, then they get worried that their partner is going to leave them and they just internally melt down. Their brain starts to freak out and try and find ways to force the connection, to remain on the same level or to even get deeper. This can also really appear as people-pleasing behaviors as well. If you are a people-pleaser, there's a good chance that you are worried that you are defective, that you are bad, or that you will be abandoned. The fifth core wound is I am not good enough, or that I am unworthy. This usually shows up as overcompensating behaviors, so overachieving, perfectionism. It can also show up as just overburdening yourself with other people's feelings. So again, people-pleasing behaviors typically come from this wound in particular. The feelings associated with this usually include guilt, and then also a little bit of shame with it too. So that sense of not being good enough or not being lovable, not feeling worthy, they always come with a lot of guilt attached because there's some reason within you that you're finding to blame yourself for not being good enough, right? We're finding the ways that we're not good enough in that, and in doing so, it's usually going to come with a lot of guilt over whatever it is that you perceive to be bad about yourself. The sixth core wound is that I am helpless or I am powerless. This core wound normally manifests in situations where you feel a lot of frustration or a lot of anger. So these are usually moments that you are going to lash out at the other person in the relationship with you. Number 7 is I will be attacked or I am unsafe. This will normally manifest in the relationship with a lot of defensiveness. It can also manifest with anger and with volatility. The 8th core wound is I am stupid or I am disrespected or I will be disrespected. Again, this one normally manifests with a big sense of anger and frustration and volatility and defensiveness. Again, this will manifest normally in a dismissive avoidant or a fearful avoidant partner. And these are honestly usually going to be the moments where you see your partner really ice over and freeze up and just kind of shut down and detach emotionally. It's a very big wound that's very easy to trigger. A really big example of this, honestly, from my personal experience, was like cutting somebody off when he started to tell a racist joke and just telling him, like, I don't want to hear that. I don't need to hear the punchline. This doesn't really fit with what I want to hear. This isn't what I choose to associate with. And he interpreted that as an attack on his character and became very defensive, and that was actually what fueled an argument that ultimately spurned a breakup. So this is a core wound to really be mindful of if you are with a dismissive avoidant partner. Be very careful with how you're setting boundaries and very mindful about how you may be opening up a core wound in doing so. If you are a dismissive avoidant partner, this is a very big core wound that you are going to need to watch out for in yourself. And see if, somebody saying something to you really triggers a lot of defensiveness. See if you can figure out where that is coming from. Is that coming from what they said, or is this coming from the core wound? Actually, the 9th core wound is I will be alone, and I think some of you are going to assume that that's going to show up for anxious, preoccupied people, but not necessarily. And the 10th core wound is I am excluded. Again, that seems like an anxious, preoccupied kind of a fear, but honestly, it is a fear for people at both ends of the spectrum. For anxious, preoccupied people, the fear of being alone or being excluded normally shows up in people-pleasing behaviors. For dismissive avoidance, it normally manifests as just never connecting in the first place, because if you don't have a connection made, then you don't have a connection to lose. So as you're going through and looking at these core wounds, as you're going through and looking at your thoughts and your feelings and your behaviors, do it with kindness, because again, remember, it's not probably coming from a bad place. There's a very low likelihood that you ever did anything with the intention of fucking up or hurting somebody in doing so. If you were in a relationship with a person who you loved, who you wanted to be with, chances are everything that you did was an attempt to have a healthy relationship. You just didn't necessarily know the behaviors of how to do so. And in getting triggered, you tend to use some behaviors that aren't super constructive. So for the rest of the day, all I want you to do is go through, unpack some of these thoughts and feelings, find your core wounds, see what has triggered you in the past, and maybe you can start to figure out where it's coming from. I also cannot recommend enough checking out the Personal Development School on YouTube. Again, Thais Gibson is incredible. She's done a lot of work. She's put together some really incredible resources that you are welcome to use in tandem with this content as well. I think it all really fits together well. As per usual, your homework for the day is to do your mirror work, do a mindfulness meditation, self-soothe using the 5 senses, practice self-care. Today I want you to do something physical, and I want you to go outside. Even if it's raining, even if it's freezing, just go outside, be outside for a moment, connect with nature, get a sense of how small you are in the universe, and just kind of marvel at something. If this video helps you in any way, make sure that you do give it the thumbs up. If you're interested in more content like this, make sure that you subscribe to Hippie Shit. Share this video with a friend that needs to hear it, and leave a comment down below to tell us where you are. Maybe comment on someone else's comment to tell them that you love them and that you're here for them. As always, thank you so much for connecting. I will see you in the next video. Bye!